So hi Matthew, how you doing? I think you've gone back over the pond this time. You're at Sea Summit this week, aren't you? So that's why we're recording this.
Correct. Yeah.
You're based in the States. Could you introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about what your role is at DQ?
Sure. Hi everybody. I'm Matthew Luken. I work for DQ Systems, where I am a vice president and strategic consultant. So I work with companies of all sizes around the globe to scale their programs efficiently and at speed.
Cool. And what's your background in terms of the work that you've done in accessibility? I know about the US Bank, so can you tell us a bit about that? And I actually don't know what got you into that and where that came from. So.
I was told that's how.
Okay.
My background is actually in service design. All my degrees are in aviation, and I started working in digital and IT. And as a service designer, just found efficiencies and engineering solutions, and just expanded them across different organizations and industries. I've worked with over 400 brands at this point, so every conceivable market that you can think of. And yes, while I was at US Bank as a UX designer doing digital transformation for them and helping them grow their UX practice into an award-winning one, I got tapped to handle digital accessibility. And we sat down and figured out how we wanted to change it from what it was, again, using a service design hat. And we were able to scale it from just 2 contractors to 5,000 people around the bank working in concert, using the same tools, same processes, same measurements, over a 22-month period. So rapid scaling to the entire enterprise.
And how long was that period that you were then working within that role that you've described? You mentioned 22 months, but
I was there for 4 years, all told, but it was just about 2.5 years that I was there doing accessibility.
Right. Cool. And then you're now working, as you say, with DQ, and I guess what you're bringing is that expertise to people who are in a similar position to you somewhere along that journey, that they're either right at the beginning and somebody just told them they need to sort it out, through to you're 22, 36 months in. What are you going to do next?
Absolutely. As you know, I was ending my bank career and looking for another opportunity. I had been a DQ customer, and they got word that I was looking and said, "Hey, can you come help us help companies scale?" So this was around the George Floyd moment in the US history. And so I was looking for a way to affect things at a much larger scale than just the bank's customers. And working with DQ, we now, have customers all around the world. So we're affecting things at a much, much higher rate because we help those companies help their customers, right? So we're talking about millions of people affected with one program. Yeah. So it's a fun activity working with all different companies of different sizes, different program maturities, different levels, different cultural problems, different organizational issues, funding, adoption, you name it, and helping them really pinpoint the problem that they have, like trying to decide whether you do it in-house or you go external or you do both. And what are the things that you consider, and what are the things that you want to think about, and how might you want to measure it so you can just see how you're doing, whether it's success, whether you need to pivot, or whether you need to change.
Well, and certainly today, I think what will be useful to focus on is, the criteria, and there are going to be lots of people, as you say, across multiple organizations. There are different people at different stages of that journey, and also probably different stakeholders inside the organization who may be seeing this picture from different sides as well. You may have the accessibility advocate, whose principal interest is seeing accessibility embedded across the organization. But you may have the CTO, or you may have the HR person talking to you about what that change is going to look like, what your preferences are in terms of what your next steps are. And I guess that's part of the mix that our audience is probably the accessibility advocate today, but they will be joined around the table with others who have a stake in it. So what's your experience in seeing, with the clients and in the bank? What does that look like when you're in the middle of it? You're obviously, brought in to sit in the middle of that mix, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a really good place to start the conversation. And the first point would be to make is that regardless of where you are in your program, meaning your maturity, whether you're just starting, whether you're 10 years in, it applies the same way. Whether you're a person that's running the program, whether you're a champion, whether you're actually an advocate sitting outside, maybe you're that leader, or maybe you're their HR person, regardless of who's in the audience that we're talking to, it starts with defining the problem and defining the outcome that you want. So working together to say, okay, we're trying to decide if we want to outsource it or staff it internally. What might that look like? Part of that is how quickly. What is the velocity? When do you need to look like X by? That kind of leads you to some general conclusions. So for example, if you're trying to do something very, very rapidly and you don't have the staff to do it today, and leadership says, yeah, we're willing to support you to get that talent. Okay, that's great. You've got some resources now. You've got some funding. You're going to work with HR to hire those people. That's great. But how long does that take? You've got to get the funding into the system. You get the jobs posted. You have to get the recruiters on. You have to interview, wait for garden leave, get them on board, train them, get them proficient, and now you can start working. That might be 2 weeks for you. That might be 9 months, right? But it's a really, really long time. So if we start from just that first piece and say, okay, we're trying to achieve this within 12 months, and it's going to take us 9 months to get our own people on, that only gives us like 3 months of a ramp. Consider getting outside resources. Maybe you get staffing augmentation through a recruitment firm. Maybe you work with a consultant. What can your budget afford? How quickly can you bring them on board? Another one might be, what is the vendor relationship in procurement? So for example, you might have AbilityNet or DQ already in your vendor system. So getting a consultant from them would be relatively quickly because you already have all that paperwork and MSAs and redlined with lawyers and all that stuff all taken care of. You could do it quickly. Or maybe you already work within your HR department where you have a staffing agency for staff augmentation, and they are able to find the talent you need for accessibility. Great, then work through that. So it's a lot of depends, but it comes down to, what are you trying to achieve? Can you get alignment in your organization of what you're trying to accomplish? And then how much time do we have and how quickly can we get there? If you're doing something short-term, look for augmentation. If you're doing something long-term, it's always best to invest in something that you're going to have long-term, like a permanent FTE or something like that.
And that's great advice. And I think, as you say, I'm hearing the service designer there say, define the problem. That's
always key. It's always
jump
the
straight
thing.
in.
It's always the thing that people forget, right? You think you're aligned, or it's a simple like, well, let's do blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, we can do blah, blah, blah. But is that really what we need to do? Let's think about that. Let's pause for just a moment. Are we all on the same page? I think it looks like this. Do you agree? Like, what's the outcome? And hypothetical example, right? You want to train 1,000 developers in digital accessibility. That's a very simple statement, but you start breaking that down and you say, but train them in what? Just fundamentals? Okay, well, that's relatively easily to do. We've got to get a 30-minute training on fundamentals and maybe a little bit of regulation. Great. Okay, I could buy that off the shelf. I could create it myself. I could work with my learning and development team in the bigger corporate sense and see if they could do it. But of course, when you really think about that, what that means is you're going to do it, but they're going to code it and put it into their system. Do we want it measured? Do we need to put it into their HR record? On and on and on, right? You start to see that the simple ask of train a bunch of people becomes a much, much more complex thing very, very quickly when you start picking at it. And you might make some decisions like, you know what? For now, we're not going to record it into the HR system that they completed it, but we want to do that later. Okay, do we do things concurrently then? Can we get a course off the shelf, take it, and then somehow record that with the vendor, spreadsheet that out and embed it into the HR system, or maybe have a business analyst code it by hand? Then we can do two things at the same time. Get there fast with somebody else, but also record it in the system. That's the type of stuff that you really want to start sitting down and really thinking about it, because now you start to see it affects how many other people need to be involved, which slows things down. How much money are you talking about? How much velocity and speed? How quickly can we get that created and get it into people's hands? But if it's something more complex, like I need to train everybody in fundamentals, so 1,000 people, but 300 developers also need to take some coursewares that will give them remediation skills, right? So they need to know about how to take a defect, a WCAG defect, and repair it. They need to know about color theory. They need to know some basics, right? Well, maybe that's 4 hours of training. You're back to the question of outsource it, build it, etc. But more importantly, there's now a cost here, because you have to take that developer offline for 4 hours and get them to train it. So that means that we've got to pay that salary to do that, which means we're not using that resource for velocity of development. Okay, what can that Agile team support? How do we slow their velocity for required training? How long do they have to take it? So you start to see that gets complex, because maybe that needs to be taken over 30 days, or maybe it could be taken over 90 days. Great, now their velocity goes from, hypothetically, say like 10% of their available bandwidth down to just 2% over a 90-day period. And they can take it as quickly or as slowly as they need to. But that opens up a whole bunch of questions: cost, velocity, involvement, speed, how quickly we get it set up, etc. So again, it's easy to start thinking about it. If you define the problem well, you think through all the outcomes that you want, you work with the people to understand what they're bringing to the table or what their embedded costs are. Now, this was one that I found that I never even thought of. Getting your internal learning and development team might be a cross-department charge for your company. And it was like $10,000 for me to pay the learning and development team to make the training, whereas I could buy something off the shelf for half that cost. Like, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things that you would, define the problem, and you start to see the outcome becomes very easy to see.
Yeah, I think I like the examples you're giving there, and I think they remind me as well that when you and I talk about this, and we've done it with roundtables and others, that there's an important word in there, which is the program that you're envisaging. That you're not going to take one action and everything's going to happen. You may need to have parallel projects. You may need to back certain horses at different times.
Right.
There may be times when internal. I was thinking, actually, we get told as well that sometimes it's better for an external person to come in and say what the person's been saying, just to validate the strategy.
In the US, they call that consultant syndrome, where the employees have been saying it for 3 years, but as soon as a high-priced consultant comes in and says the exact same thing, all of a sudden leadership goes, "Oh my God, I've never heard that before."
Yeah. So that's it could be one of your strands, which you put in at a certain point when you're going to hit a particular sort of strategic bump in the road. And meanwhile, you may have more operational stuff that you try and do internally by connecting with other members of the teams and connecting them, via other places.
So you just actually made a spark go off in my head, which is sometimes you might even use a consultant to help you tell the story of what you're trying to achieve. Because hearing it from that consultant and the amount of money you're going to need and the velocity it's going to give you might be better positioned from somebody external explaining it to your leadership team instead of you. But again, that's a use case for that particular organization. But there's another piece that in that segment that you just said, which is building upon what we said just a moment ago, trying to build the program, etc., and trying to define the problem statement. Also think about that bigger timeline, right? Again, you're talking about program and building a sustainable program. To get from one level of maturity in a program to another could take a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on your velocity, depending on your organization. So be thinking about the short-term goal of that, in the example we used, training, creation. But what is the long-term goal? What do you want to look like in 3 years? Are you going to be able to onboard a new employee relatively quickly with what you're creating and get them up to speed or up to snuff and how you want it? Or what about the person who's been there for those 3 years? Will this training serve them as a refresher course or a performance improvement plan for someone that, like a developer that's not doing well with accessibility? Have you considered that in that bigger picture? So you might want to approach leadership to say, look, we're going to build a training program, but we're going to do it in stages. We're going to do this immediate need now using an outside agency, and then we're going to work with L&D concurrently to build something that's more sustainable, more updatable, and more on brand with our culture, and be able to serve these other needs of onboarding and performance improvements and things like that, and the person that needs refresher training every year to keep them excited about doing digital accessibility, or maturing in their role, or giving them an enhancement in their role, which is what we all want from a corporate standpoint, right? In maturing the employee and giving them better and better skills, right? So part B is, what's the bigger long-term goal that you're looking for 3 years out, 5 years out?
So I'm gonna just ask one last question, because this is really a primer for the conversation with the other guys who aren't able to join in with. But I'm just wondering, in the sense, what we're also playing with is the preferences internally. What people who are making these decisions in the accessibility advocacy role that we think we're talking to are probably not running the program from the top down. They're probably speaking to senior leaders. They're probably talking to people in teams next to them. I'm just wondering what your experience is in terms of this balance between the short term and the long term. The tactical bit of getting something going is often better than persuading people they're going to end up over here. You could spend a long time creating a strategy that nobody's really bought into, when you could have at least got the ball rolling and got certain things happening. I don't quite know how you see that in terms of your role and the way that your experience works. Is that's also a reason why you might be trying to build something internally, but do the short-term stuff externally, for example, or even vice versa.
I think it's really important. If you're not understanding who needs to buy into it, in this example of training, carrying that arc, HR and learning development need to be on board. Obviously, leadership, who's paying for it. If you're not understanding their involvement, their commitment, what you're asking of them, what you need from them, and you're clearing and defining it and bringing them on board and convincing them this is the right thing to do, short term and long term, then you could be incorrectly underperforming in the program, because they'll be like, well, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And they're like, so you're failing at this. And it's like, well, no, that's what I interpreted you wanted, but you're right, I didn't get alignment. So, okay, I can see why it seems like it's underperforming, but it's not. So again, understanding what they're trying to do gains alignment, gains support, but also gains insurance that you are sure that you are doing the right thing that they need for their outcomes. And this is a bigger conversation about anything you design, and any problem statement you're trying to solve is understanding that other person's point of view or motivation. What are they being held accountable for? If you can create a win-win situation where you understand what they need and what they're measured on and what their performance plan is based on, and build something that actually is like, hey, I can show you how these things actually tick those boxes for your review, and you get your promotion and your bonus or your pay raise or whatever that might be, and your kudos from your boss, then great, because they're more likely to buy into it. So it's really important. And that ties us to measurement, because you want to be bringing them along as you go along. Maybe it's a 3-year arc. Okay, here's where we are. We had a goal of 1,000 people, and we were going to do 300 in the first 3 months, and we're right on track, or we're ahead. Building that confidence through measurement and reporting is also critical, because you want to make sure that you can tell the story and keep track of where you're going, which would, if it's not working well, you could pivot from, or maybe you're looking at from the business measurement of it, right? Is this the right investment with this particular vendor? Are they performing? Are they underperforming? Are you going to renew the contract? You have data to go to your procurement team or your vendor management team to say, yes, I can confirm that they did what they said. They're doing great. They're pushing through the volume that we need. We're getting good feedback from people. We can see that the learning is sticking because we can see the improved quality of workmanship, et cetera, et cetera. So measurement, ensuring you're on the same page with the people that you're servicing and that you're meeting their needs in addition to your needs is going to be critical for the success of that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I guess that's, again, you're just reminding me the program word is all about the mix of different stakeholders, the mix of different activities. And as you say, aligning with their goals is always going to be the most successful starting point. If they feel like your program has an element in it that's going to deliver their particular priorities, that's the point about wrapping that up into one thing at the start, the problem statement, then revealing sort of multiple pieces of work that need doing.
And that might be a cost-benefit ratio, because here's an example that when you really start thinking about something. Okay, a bank has, let's just say, 5,000 customer-facing support people, which include people in the branch physically, as well as your phone call, bank system, whatever, call center. Let's say that's 5,000 people. You're going to give them an hour of digital accessibility, disability etiquette, basic fundamentals. That's an hour worth of training. An hour worth of training at 5,000 people, taking them offline, that's a significant chunk of money. Are you understanding that from the business perspective, right? There is a hidden cost to that because they still have to pay the staff, but they have to increase their staff to cover the person that's offline taking the course. And how much value does it bring? Does it bring $1 million of value to the branch customer service team? I think yes, obviously, but you'd have to think that that's the way they think so that you can make the argument that it's needed. It will benefit the company in these ways, and it is worth $1 million price tag.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I hope CSUN goes well. It's a bit crazy, I know. I can imagine you in the corridors there and in the coffee bars and connecting up. Are you presenting as well?
No. Just supporting the awareness lab.
Okay.
And our customers.
Well, have a great time. And thank you very much for setting the scene there. I mean, I think that, as you say, there's balance to be made here between internal and external resourcing, and that what we need is that clear sort of sense of program and direction and problem solving, which will then be, some things will happen in some way, some will happen in the other. There isn't an instant choice between the two. It's not always binary. And so we really need to think that through and work out in a bit more detail where the right answer is in front of us now.
And you'll hear some great examples from Charlie and Zoe.
Absolutely.
All right.
Great.